So here I am using SQL Server 2017 Management Studio to connect to SQL Server 2016 server. So let's first drop SQL Server 2016 database if it is already exist on the server. Now let's create a brand new instance of SQL Server 2016 database and use that database. So now let's create a simple stored procedure and simple function that gets data from the session context and display it. So here I am creating a stored procedure USP get employee detail, and I am getting the session context value of name key and converting it back in nvarchar 20. So let's create the stored procedure. Similarly here I have created a function fnGetName and it returns the nvarchar 20. This function gets the data from the session context of the name key and convert it to nvarchar and return it. So let's create. So now let's execute this stored procedure and function. So now we can see the result of both stored procedure and function is null because we haven't set any data inside the session context. So let's set data in the session context. We can use sp set session context stored procedure to set the data inside the session context. So I have passed the key name and the value Ashish Shukla. So let's execute that. So now this will set the value of name key as Ashish Shukla in the session context. So now let's execute the stored procedure and function one more time. So now we can see Ashish Shukla is printed by stored procedure and function as it is stored in the session context. So as I stated earlier, the value stored inside the session context can only be accessible inside the single SQL connection. If we create a new SQL connection and try to execute the spn function, then we will not get the value. Now here we can see the value is still null because we have stored the session context value in one SQL connection and it will not be accessible in another instance. So in this instance, let's set the value of session context with the Ashish Shukla new. Now execute this, and by running the stored procedure and function we will get the new value in this instance, and if we run the older instance then here we have the different value of name session context. Now let's set the key name inside the session context as read only so that no one can modify it later. So now I have set the value of name as modern Pathshala. So now if we execute the stored procedure and function we will get the new value from the session context. So as I have set the name key as read only, so if anyone tries to set its value again, then SQL Server will throw exception that this session context is read only. So we have saw how we can set the value in the session context and how we can retrieve back from the session context.